Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host for Freelance Writing Direct. In this short, soundbite-filled podcast, I'll cover everything the freelance and creative writer and author needs to do to move forward with their writing, their creativity, and their career. Through conversations with guests, we'll cover tips, tricks, and actionable strategies. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and Spotify. Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct, and I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus. And today, I'm so excited to have Milda De Voe with us today, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's an internationally published creator of short fiction and poetry, and holds numerous writing awards in a broad range of genres, including poetry, literary fiction, horror, fantasy, and creative nonfiction. De Voe also runs Pen Parentis, a literary nonprofit she founded in 2013 to help writers stay on creative track while raising children. She is the author of Book and Baby, a fun-to-read guide showing parents how to find the time, money, and energy to devote to creative writing. The book is organized from infancy to grown and flown and includes personal anecdotes from various established authors. In 2021, it won first prize at the Next Gen Indie Book Awards. Her debut story collection, A Flash of Darkness, is available in a link that I'm going to share in the show notes. Reviewers have called her a femme Kafka. Welcome, Milda. It's so great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Estelle. It's great to be here. I sound really good on paper. It's kind of scary.
You sound great and you look great and your book is great. I just devoured it and really enjoyed A Flash of Darkness. And I recommend everyone to read these stories, which are definitely a flash of darkness, but it kind of grips you by the throat and doesn't let go. Today's episode I'm calling Productivity and Parenting with Pen Parentis' Milda De Voe. And so let's talk, we have so much to talk about. First of all, Pen Parentis, can you tell us, because it is such a help to parents who are writers, and my daughter is a teen now, she's 14, but I met you a couple of years ago. It was definitely before the pandemic. And we met through Marcel Soviero, who at the time was the editor and the publisher of Brainchild, which I wrote for quite often. And it was wonderful to meet you. I think we met in the city. And obviously things have changed now since your kids are older. Pen Parentis has been around for a while. And there's been lots of changes, I suppose, since the pandemic. So can you give a little eye view of Pen Parentis?
Sure, thanks. So Pen Parentis is a nonprofit. It's a 501c3 federally recognized nonprofit. And its mission is to help writers stay on creative track after they have kids. So we provide all kinds of resources to try to help people just stay creative. It's pretty hard when you have a kid to not give up your entire writing career for the entire time that they're growing up, because as we all know, parenting is 24/7, you are constantly on. And so to balance that with an artist's life, which is also 24/7, becomes kind of a shuffling, interesting, creative thing. We always say that you can't look at your life as a balance that's like scales of justice. It can't have just two sides. You cannot just try to balance your life against your career, or it will just always make you miserable. Instead, if you see your life as more of a mobile, where every relationship is sort of hanging on the mobile somewhere, and your career is on the mobile, your relationship to yourself is on the mobile, everything has a space. And then when one thing gets heavy, everything else kind of has to move around, shift around to keep the balance. But it's just a nice way to look at things and to sort of give yourself the permission, if you will, to be an artist and to be a great writer and to to give yourself that time. Like you really have to have that time. We found in Pen Parentis, so we have 3 programs. One is a fellowship, an annual fellowship to inspire people to write when they have a new child. That's up, and you can enter that until your kid is age 10. And it's not writing about parenting, it's writing creatively. So it really tries to inspire you to just stay on whatever track you were on before you had kids, or if you have a kid and are now inspired to write, to just write something new. We also have monthly literary salons. Those are open to the public. Anybody can watch them. And we interview a panel. Our curator, Christina Chu, and I interview a panel of different writers every month. And all of them have kids and they're all successful. And it's very, very cool to hear that other people have managed to do it. And there are so many different ways, there's so many different paths, and all of them, whichever one works for you, is the right path for you. So it's like really great to hear all the different possibilities. And then the third thing we have builds community. It's the cycle of support. It's a weekly accountability group. You get put with a small group of other authors that also have children, and they could be writing absolutely anything, any large writing project. It can be anything. We have somebody writing a musical all the way to poetry collections, anybody who's writing something longer that they just feel like they need accountability to get it done. And they want that accountability to come from somebody who understands what they're going through. So we're all parents, we get it. We know that, if your kid gets something, hoof and mouth disease, like we're not going to freak out and go, oh, that's horrible. We're going to go, oh, I'm so sorry, we'll see you next week. Like,
Yeah.
so we get it. Like it's a community of like-minded people, and we really do work hard to get people to stay creative.
And it's so important to have a community, especially in those early days of parenting, when you just are looking for the support and you don't know where to find it. And I think that's really wonderful that you've been doing that and do that.
As a new parent, it's easy to find other parents to talk about parenting, but all of your writer friends who are single and are up late and whatever they do to get their writing done, like you have to evolve. You have to evolve and change because your life is different. And sometimes it's better. That's a secret.
I know.
Some people get much more productive after they have kids. Just don't tell anyone.
When I was working in publishing in magazines as a magazine editor, I would stay till 9, 10 at night and then go home and then start again the next morning. And, when you have kids, it's really hard to do that. And then to have that creative life, you have to carve out the time. So you're kind of like an expert on parenting and productivity as well. It would be so helpful to hear some of your tips, because even if our kids are teens or tweens or in elementary school, we still need to find that time to devote to our creative souls, our creative time.
Absolutely. And I have to say, the number one thing, Estelle, is something that you just touched on, which is like when you had your editor job, you thought of it as a job. So you would stay late and do it if you had something to finish.
Yeah.
Writing, a creative writing career is a career. You can treat it as a job. It should have weight in your life. It's not just self-care. Like a lot of people like to say, oh, it's self-care. You have to take your long, whatever. Yes, it feels amazing to do your writing, but it's also a job and it deserves your respect. You respect your job, your career, right? If that's what you want to do, and if you really legitimately want it to be a career, you should spend some of your resources on it. Your time, your energy, and your money are your resources as a human being. And you should spend some of that on your career. And if that career is writing, then it's perfectly reasonable for you to say to any caregiver that you can, either somebody you hire or a spouse or a mother-in-law or some grandparent, like anybody, like, hey, can I have an hour once every 2 weeks? Like, it doesn't have to be all the time, but every once in a while you are allowed to say, like, whatever. And if you have somebody that you really feel is responsible enough to take care of your kid for longer periods, well, you can take longer periods, treat it like a job, go away and leave the house, go and sit somewhere. And if you don't have money, then it can be a cafe, or libraries are great for this. There are public spaces that welcome people to sit there with their laptops. And then if you do have money, you can join a writing center. I know people that take hotel rooms for the weekend, one overnight, and they can get a huge amount of writing done just because they're not sitting in the space where they also have to think about their laundry and their bills and the kid who wants the peanut butter corners cut off. Like like it's one of those things. I think parenthood fills every possible, it's like a goldfish. Like if you give a goldfish a bigger bowl, it'll grow bigger. And I think that kids are like that too. Like the more you give them, the more they want and will take, which
Yeah.
is not a bad thing, but it's just an interesting thing to know.
One of the things you're saying is treat it like a job and find that time that you can dedicate solely to writing.
Here's the thing. I know a lot of people like to talk about parenthood in the lens of a career, but I personally caution against that because it demeans parenthood. I don't think that it's, first of all, in a regular career, you can follow a track and advance, and you know you're going to advance. If you do the right things, you will advance. If you do all the right things in parenthood, you have absolutely no idea whether your kids are going to be great or horrible or what. They are themselves. They're human beings. So you have to remember that parenthood is actually a relationship. It's either a relationship that you chose, like your life partner is a person that you chose, you spend a lot of time thinking about it, you spend a lot of time like worrying about it, and then you try to do your best. Once you're stuck with your partner, you're like, oh gosh, I didn't notice all this stuff. That's one way that you could have approached parenthood. And the other way was, oh, hello, I'm pregnant, I have a child now. And that is like becoming a big sister or a big brother. You've got this relationship that you didn't pick, but here it is, and now you're going to make the best of it. And I think that if we remind ourselves that being a parent is just, not just, but it is a lifelong relationship that we're developing, that we're learning, that we're evolving and changing. And just because you're really good at this part doesn't mean you're going to be good at the next part. And doesn't mean that you're not going to suddenly be good at the third part. Like as your child ages, it's a whole new ball game every time, right? Like being the mother of an infant is nothing like being the mother of a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
At all, like even at all, zero.
So true. So what are some more productivity tips that you could
Sure.
suggest? We like to
So,
be actionable.
so one thing I want to begin with is that there is no right path to this. There is only the path that works best for you. So there have been, I mean, a lot of people will take an hour by putting, like putting on a television show or putting, giving their kids an iPad. That's a way to grab an hour and a half. And again, no judgments. Like everybody, you have to do what works for you. And if what you have is an iPad, that's what you have, right? Again, but I prefer like leaving the house. I know there's some great parents who write during classes. Like if somebody has a violin class or a swim class, or there's a coaching session that they have to take, and you're stuck in the waiting room, right there is your writing center. Like that is a fantastic half an hour or 1 hour that you could be doing. And I have to tell you, if you leave the waiting room area and actually get, so most people probably listening to this have cars. And if you get in your car, that's a private office. And a lot of times it even has Wi-Fi. You can like hook up your phone to the cellular, link your computer to your phone, and then you're in a private office. Nobody's going to bother you for the entire time. Remember to set an alarm so you don't forget your child.
Right. Now, some people tell me that they like to speak their ideas into their phone or speak their stories. I haven't experimented with that yet. Have you?
I personally don't use voice technology because I write very differently. The channel between, I type faster than I can speak. And I speak, as you can see, with hesitations and going back and changing things. And when I type much more fluently. So it doesn't work for me. Lots and lots of parents it works great for. They love it. They love their notes function. Some people use like actual apps you can download. Oh, one thing that has to do with this, it's the opposite. You know how writers frequently want to read their work aloud. And sometimes as a parent, you feel awkward because there's people like your kids are around. You don't want to be reading your work aloud necessarily, but you can put on the accessibility functions of your computer and it will read it back to you. So you can put in headphones and listen to your computer terribly read your work aloud. And like on the one side, it's not the same as reading it with a full expression and putting emotion into it yourself. It strips it of all of the drama and all the things. But on the other hand, that's kind of not a bad way to hear your writing at least once, to just sort of clean it up and make sure you're not repeating anything and stuff like
Right.
that.
No,
So
that's a great tip. That's that. I'm gonna have to try that. In fact, I like that.
And then you can speed it up. Like, hurry up, British man, speak faster.
So how do you deal with, I mean, yes, we're parenting, especially in the early days, if we're not working outside of the home, but working inside of the home while we're still working. How do you get that level of understanding or respect from a partner or a spouse or somebody that you're involved with that needs to understand they're with a creative person?
Yeah, that is a real issue. And that's an issue even for people who don't have children. It's worse if your spouse expects you to be only the caregiver of your child and nothing else. It's like if that's a spouse, but that's a spousal problem. Like, that's not really a writing problem. And yet it is a huge problem to be able to write. But I think the first thing you have to do, and this is hard enough, is to acknowledge that you are a writer and that this is important. And if you can accept that as a truth for yourself, then communicating that to your spouse is important. Like, anything that is real and you believe it about yourself. And if, I don't know, some people like have problems telling their partners they need to go to church, or they have problems telling their like whatever. It's, if it's a true belief that you know you are really an artist, a real writer, you deserve that. You are that. Like, you don't have to deny part of yourself to fit in your marriage. Like, we hope.
Yeah.
we hope that your partner accepts you for all of you, and that includes the artist part of you.
I think it, like in the beginning when I was a new mom, I would say, oh, I want to write this. And my husband's more like a stoic. He'd be like, this, get it out. I'm like, but a creative person can't just get it out. I ruminate, I watch bad television, I watch reality television, and it starts percolating. And so it was kind of he understands now completely. And he also saw me fully disappear finishing my book. So he understands now, but I think in the beginning it was an education, because he's a business person and he's creative in his business, but he's not necessarily a creative person in the creative world as a writer like I am.
That's absolutely true. And it is very hard to explain to anybody, whether they're your spouse or not. It is very hard to explain to somebody. Think about your parents, like trying to explain to them what you're doing. It is really difficult to explain to somebody who is not part of this world why you might need to go take a walk instead of sitting at your computer typing. And that's part of the reason why I highly recommend like getting a community, or at least a friend who is also a writer who has kids. Like, get together with somebody else who is like you and who is in the process with you. And if you can get 5 people together, it's a lot of when people go to MFA programs, or if they go to writing classes, they come out with a small group of people, 2, 1, 6 that get it. And having that community, that writing community, is really important. Another way to find that is to go to readings. Like, you can sometimes, if you end up at the same kinds of readings with people, you sometimes find out that that person is also a writer. But and like in Pen Prentice, we just have these accountability groups in which you meet other people. But that building of community, even if it's just one person, Facebook used to be, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be a good place where you could kind of find somebody and maybe start exchanging work or email.
It's really true. And we saw each other at the AWP conference in Seattle, which again is like 10,000 writers and writing teachers from all over the world. And I moderated and was part of a panel on writing and using literary techniques for mainstream publications. So that was really cool. And you had a little salon where we could come and hear about Pen Parentis and had other people from the community get together. So that was a wonderful opportunity as well.
Yeah.
So let's segue into your work, because it's so interesting to me because it's a dichotomy, right? Like you're dealing with parents in this very nurturing way, supporting them and building community. And then you have this book of very dark, fascinating, riveting stories and magnificent tales that go across genres and time and deals with death in a very profound way. And it's, for me, like I look at, dichotomies, and it's just, to me, it's so interesting because it's almost like the two sides of you, the one side expressing this as a writer and the other side in what you do as your business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to. Thank you. That's so kind of you. And thank you for the wonderful words about my book. I'm very proud of it and amazed that it's out in the world. It's kind of shocking to me. I can't believe it, because as you say, it does sort of span crazy genres and go all over the place. And this country, America, wants us to be pigeonholed so badly. It wants everything to be a checkbox. And maybe it's because we're so technology, like everything is about getting filed in the right bookshelf or getting filed in the right search term. And it is extraordinarily difficult to have a parenting book that's like funny and warm and charming and full of famous authors and like lovely. And on the other hand, I was like, wow, that's like Kafka. It's like so dark, But here's the thing. We're human beings. And the thing that distinguishes us from all the other animals is we can hold two very contradictory thoughts at the same time and believe both of them.
Isn't there a famous quote that says we contain multitudes? I mean, that's sort of how I look at it, like that.
That's true. Yes. And that's exactly it. And we do. And I celebrate all of that. I am a very strong proponent of irony. I love it. I like seeing it. I like finding it. I think that if anything is going to save us in today's world, it's going to be our senses of humor. I'm terrified watching all of our senses of humor get smashed away and everything's so serious. Everything's always so serious. I think we have to laugh. I think that we're given laughter as a gift to just get us through the crazy.
Tell me about your genesis of this book and, A Flash of Darkness, and tell me about your process, because you had so many stories. It's like 250 pages or something like that. Yeah, so that's a lot of stories. So tell me how that all evolved.
Okay, so all of these stories were written over time. So it is a collection of my fiction, and a lot of them have been published. Many of them have won prizes in various things. And I think it's kind of interesting that everything from literary fiction, like straight literary fiction, to like actual horror genre in like horror magazines that fans read. So what happened was that this fantastic, so Angela Borda is like the best human being in the world. And she is the publisher of the Santa Barbara Literary Journal. And she published me, and then she published me again. And then she asked me to submit to some other anthology that she was doing. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why did she want my stuff? But she liked my work. Like, she's an editor who loved my work. And I kind of couldn't believe it.
No, that's great.
I was like, what's going on? Why does this editor like my work so much? What's wrong? But she loved it. And so she was doing this series called Bold New Voices. And she has so she had this one that she'd already published, and it was beautiful. And she asked me to be the second one. And I was like, wow, really? She's like, yeah, submit me a collection of stories. So I have a collection of literary fiction. And so I sent her this very, organized, beautiful, and like thought-provoking, whatever, literary fiction. And she's like, yeah, I want your weird stuff. I
I read that in the
really weird
letter.
stuff. And I was like, what? She's like, this is good. You'll get this published. I just like went and collected a whole bunch of stuff. And then luckily, thank God, Max Talley edited it and fixed like everything that was wrong with it. And he put it in the right order. It was in the wrong order. It was like, there was one story that had the wrong ending. He's like, fix this, get this right. And so like, I loved working with him, and I loved working with Border Books.
So she wrote in, I think it was the foreword, about how you had submitted, and then she said, I want your wild stuff, your darker stuff, your, really, and that's so fascinating to me that she saw even, deeper. And how long did this whole process take? Was it a year? Was it 2 years? I know some pieces had been published, but how did that happen?
So collecting the work together took not very long. It was in a course of several months. But that intro is written by Max Talley, actually. And he was the curating editor. I think he called it the curator because he put them in order and all. But anyway, the actual, like, they asked for new pieces. So I think I wrote 2 new stories just for the collection, or maybe it was just, I can't remember how many, but I wrote some new ones just for the collection. And then it was just like finding the ones that would fit and the ones that wouldn't fit. So there was a lot of back and forth on that.
So people are looking to have like an essay collection or short story collection published. Do you recommend that they first try and get literary publications to publish their pieces, or do you recommend some other way? I know you were sort of discovered because you worked with this editor.
And I feel like that was the most blind and fantastic luck, but I work really hard on my stories. Like, I mean, I constantly, you ask me what my process is, every time that I am distracted from one thing, I'm working on something else. Like, I don't really downtime very well. In fact, my entire family hates that fact. Like, I love to work. My daughter's like, you love to work too much. I'm like, I really love it. I really do. And so when I'm writing a grant, let's say for Pen Parentis, and it's driving me up the wall, and I can't with the boxes and the checks and the budgets, I put it away and I go write something creative. And the more creative it is, the better, the more freeing, the more liberated I feel from the grant application. And then when I get into the weeds on something that's fiction or poem or something, I've taken out and put back in a comma 15 times. I'm like, okay, without the comma. Okay, with the comma. Okay, without the comma. Like, come on. I get into this like cycle of I don't know what. And then I'm like, why am I doing this? I have to go work. And then I go to do some like newsletter or some more proper organized thing that is not just letting my brain go. So I think that's how I stay sane, is I just go back and forth between really rigid stuff like grant writing back to very
left brain, right brain. Yeah, left brain, right brain.
Yeah.
What are some of your writing tips for people just writing, whether it's creatively or in general?
I think first of all, get community, like find a partner, find somebody. Don't be only in your own head. You need to get it out. And also send your work out, like send it somewhere. Send it. If you're scared of sending it to big publications, send it to little publications. Like, learn to just be okay with rejection. It's not about you. It's not about your writing. It's about just sometimes people don't have space for your piece. It's fine. Like, if you don't send it out, you're never going to get published. And maybe you never want to get published. Maybe you just want to write, which is fine. That's like, you can do that. But I really think it's healthy to, the funny thing is like for me, when I'm about to send something out, like the minute that I'm about to really send it out, I look at it one more time and I have so many edits. Like, there's just something about knowing your reader, knowing who's going to read it. And knowing who's going to read it makes it better. And that's why I recommend having a reader or a community or something. So you're not just sending out unfinished work, but having somebody and being like, okay, so, they're going to hate this,
One of the things that I always recommend for my students is to, before you send it to an editor or to a publication, email it to yourself and
Oh, that's
look at it
clever.
with fresh eyes. I always do that. And that's where you find, and read it aloud, of course, but
Mhm.
that's when you find you're like, oh my God, I was going to send this,
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
grammatical thing or whatever. So I feel like that helps a lot. What is next for you, Milda?
I have a manuscript of a novel that I really want to play with. Like it's done, but it's only done like on the surface level. Like it's done enough that if I had an editor, I could probably work on it and make it better. But I want to go the next level. I do this a lot. Like I'll be finished with something and then I'll be like, no, I have a better idea. I want to make it better. That's why those stories are so weird, because they've probably, every one of those stories has been 15 drafts of like making it
I
better.
would say weird, because I feel like weird is a negative word. I would say
Okay.
quirky. People can relate
Quirky.
to quirky. We all think of ourselves in some level as having our little quirkiness. And I think that is maybe a way to think of it in your mind.
Cool. So I want to make my novel more quirky.
I like it. I like it. And where can people find you on social media? I'm going to include all the links to everything in the show notes, but if you
Cool.
can share that, that would be
Yeah.
great.
So the easiest way is I have a website, mmdevoe.com, mmdevoe.com. And on every social media, I am at mmdevoe. So Facebook, find me on mmdevoe. Twitter, I'm on, and I'm the most Twitterer. I love Twitter. And I follow
Still?
back. I do not love the dude who owns it right now, but I love Twitter very much. And it feels like somebody moved into my favorite mansion and is redecorating it. And it's making me mad because I love it. Here's another way to stay in touch with me. So I have a Substack and it's free, and it's mmdevoe.substack.com. And I send out a weekly doofy thing that people have started liking. Like it was supposed to be me telling people about my writing stuff. Like that was what it was meant to be. But now it's like it's literally called This Is Ridiculous. And it is. So
That's
feel
funny.
free to subscribe to that. It's funny.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Milda. It was such a great pleasure talking to you and getting your tips on productivity and parenting and talking about your quirky book and the books to come.
Zany.
And I'm going to share everything in the show notes. And it was really a pleasure. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you, Estelle. Thank you so much for having me on the show. This is great.
My pleasure. Hi, everybody. It's Estelle Erasmus, and I'm so thrilled to announce that my book, Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, is out and available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and wherever books are sold. So I would love it if you'd pick up a copy, and I think you'll learn a lot. Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.